Welcome to the Getting Into Good Trouble podcast, where we make it our mission to challenge, question, and inspire you to do the same. I'm one of your hosts, Elle O'Neill.
I'm Jocelyn Towns.
I'm Cade Ranking.
And I'm Tiger Wang.
In today's episode, we will discuss the 2024 London farmers' protest.
So, as a little background on to what's happening, the inheritance tax is a tax that applies to all British citizens currently except farmers, and it says that they can take 40% of their current value, but it's now going to be applied to farmers, and they will have to pay a 20% tax on farms worth over £1 million.
Yeah, the UK government says all this is a part of an economic reform that is needed. They argue that the 20% tax rate is actually an upgrade from the previous 40%, and that the families will have 10 years to repay it without interest.
So with all these policy changes and frustrations building, it didn't really take long for farmers to take action. By the late 2024, protests had started popping up all across the UK.
Since November of 2024, the UK farmers have been strongly fighting back against this inheritance tax that the government put in place. The protests started out small, but they quickly grew into large disruptions, like tractors blocking streets, even tanks, and thousands of farmers marching on London, with signs saying no farms, no food, no future, or we can't afford to feed you anymore. Yeah, and we're not just talking about a few signs. Farmers rolled into major cities with their tractors covered with Union Jacks, literally blocking roads and slowing traffic to a crawl. London saw some huge disruptions. Hundreds of tractors moving through the streets, jamming up key routes, and making sure their voices were heard. Farmers used tractors to block streets in central London. Over 1,000 tractors participated in a mass rally in Whitehall. Demonstrations involved marching to locations such as Parliament Square and Hyde Park. A rally on February 10, 2025, drew more than 1,000 tractors to Whitehall.
Farmers are gathering in town centers, parking their tractors in public squares, and even staging sit-ins outside government offices. Westminster saw some huge demonstrations, with farmers demanding the government reverse the inheritance tax changes.
I heard you were talking about a tank. Isn't it on the side of the protesters?
Yeah, they're on the side of the protesters. They're covered in Union Jacks and are helping with the tractors block the streets.
So what were the biggest protests?
The biggest protest was organized in early January of 2025. Farmers organized slow-moving tractors and completely shut down traffic in central parts of London. Social media blew up with hashtag Save Our Farms, and even people outside of farming paid attention. The government's perspective on the inheritance tax is that it is a necessary measure to repair public finances and is a fair and balanced approach. They estimate that the tax will impact only around 500 estates.
The protesters aren't believing the government. The government's estimating about 500 estates will be affected annually, but the protesters argue that it will be thousands that are affected.
And added to all that, there's a real worry about food security. If farmers can't hand down their lands because of the tax, increasing number of farms might be sold. This would mean fewer British farms, and everybody would be more dependent on foreign food. And if international supply chains are broken, the UK could be hit hard financially.
Many farmers are asset rich but cash poor and struggle to make a living. Rising costs and contracting income contribute to the financial strain on farmers. And when you add the tax on top of all that, farmers have a lot against them.
All the farmers really want is to talk to the government about them lifting the inheritance tax or give them better living standards, because they really are our future in London's economy.
Actually, an interviewed farmer said that over the past few years, their income through cereal and dairy products has been decreasing by over 70% because local stores and groceries have been decreasing the prices they sell it at.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really created like a domino effect.
The way that the farmers see it, without them, England is going to really struggle. They're going to have to import more food. Prices are going to go up, and there's just going to be more stress on England, the farmers, and the people that have provided them food for centuries are going to be like washed away because of this and other contributing factors.
Mm-hmm. And then there's the politics of it all. Prime Minister Starmer pretty much said the public has to choose between better living standards and tax breaks.
Yeah, and the prime minister has been avoiding the farmers everywhere he's gone. And in an article that I read, he cut his meeting short because there were protests outside. So the farmers just wanted to talk to him, but he left as quickly as he could.
Wow.
So he's basically avoiding them, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's really interesting because that means that if he keeps doing this, these protests will probably extend for longer amounts of time and be more impactful. And with him not seeing these protesters, the protests will probably escalate.
The government is holding firm on their inheritance tax policy despite the protests, primarily because it views the tax as a necessary measure to repair public finances in a fair way. Labor leaders have shown no signs of reversing the policy, emphasizing its necessity to fund public services. The government's stance has led to a deadlock with the farming community, as farmers continue to express concerns over the potential impacts on family-run farms and domestic food security. The National Farmers Union has hinted at the possibility of more extreme actions if their concerns are not addressed, indicating that the situation remains tense and unresolved.
So the big question, where does this go from here? Will the government tweak the policy, or will the protests just escalate?
One thing's for sure, though. This issue isn't disappearing. These protests are still occurring, and the debate over the inheritance tax and farming policies is far from over.
Okay, thank you for listening to the Getting Into Good Trouble podcast. If you like this episode, go check out some of our others.